with Cheney. Whites suddenly resented Jews being a part of our struggle at that time. Rabbi, either Wiesel was not a rabbi, but Rabbi, uh,
Heschel. Heschel, yes.
part of our struggle, we're in terms of our faith. So that for a long time, the chairman individual people, Kipper Captain, a Jewish guy. So we marched together down to the years. When you were kids, you, Justin Johnson, we stood in the pulpit in Skokie
Hmm.
because Frank Collins threatened to do a Nazi march to Skokie. At that time, many Holocaust survivors were still alive. Not to irritate them, bring back the rest of the memories of their lives. So we would trip life in Pittsburgh. Been that down through the years, so we had to respond to the situation because it's a gated community, seemingly isolated. But when evil strikes, it does not spare anybody. The groups that struck the most are blacks, Jews, Latinos, small ethnic groups. But when we come together, we become a coalition, a rainbow coalition. I'll fight back and fight back. We must.
Rabbi Gordon, what happened? Just take us back.
What happened in Highland Park?
Yes, what happened in Highland Park, and what do you see happening? Because we had later on that night something happened. We had a mass shooting in Gary. We've had so many this year. But what happened in Highland Park?
Pandemic that is a plague on this country right now that has to do with the availability of these high-powered AR-15 type rifles, and then throw that together with an alienated, disaffected young people, young men. They're all young men, and whether it's in a community like Highland Park or it's a community like Gary, the hopelessness that seems to be there. It's not just mental illness, and that is too easy a dismissal of what's going on. There's an anger, and when Prime Minister Abe was assassinated in Japan, as horrible as that was, to say the news reported that there are 10 deaths in all of Japan a year by guns. 10. And how a nation like ours can allow this to happen. And there's sometimes we can find motives, as crazy as they may be, like we did in Buffalo and at Tree of Life in Pittsburgh. The motives for those killings were the grand replacement theory, the paranoia that somehow there was an attack on white society. I mean, this crazy paranoia that has been allowed and enabled by the previous administration. But motive is not the issue here. This is something really a plague, a sickness that's in our country right now that we can't come up with an answer exactly of trying to explain it. It's destroying our nation, and I think so many of us are really worried about where this country is going and the division in this country at this moment.
Mhm. And you're right. I mean, Reverend Jackson, if I may, just to pick up on the rabbi's point, the country of Japan, it has 126 to 127 million people. I mean, if you round that up, it would be 27 people in the United States who would be killed if if we were on track with one another. So how they get 10 people per year, and if you look at the hoops through which you must jump in order to get a gun in Japan, you can understand how and why people do not have them. Reverend Jackson.
And then what we're looking at is, when these children are targeted, these are not just mentally ill. These are ideological. It means you shoot Jews, you shoot blacks, it means you shoot Latinos in Uvalde, Texas. It means you shoot Asian Americans. These are not, they dismiss them as mentally ill or crazy, without diminishing the need for more mental health care. These are ideological based on the learned behavior.
Absolutely. I mean, but you've pivoted to a reason, Rabbi Gordon, that a lot of people going past, I mean, Mitch McConnell, even people on the right and the left, want to break this down and make this about mental illness. And you're saying, no, there is a sickness in the culture. Could you speak to that?
There has to be support for mental health in this country, just like there has to be support for all kinds of health in this country. I'm not denying that. Mm-hmm. But some people who are using the mental health argument are using it as an excuse to not address the issue of gun control. They would they would rather place the blame on mental health rather than on the accessibility of guns. Every country has to deal with mental health. There are young people who are troubled everywhere, but they don't have access to AR-15s. And that's something that can be dealt with through our laws. But Mitch McConnell and others are denying that possibility when the Supreme Court prevents New York from enforcing its own laws about gun control in public. Then it becomes a pandemic of guns, and the accessibility is the issue. Yes, deal with mental health and well-being for sure, but that is not enough, and they're using that as an excuse to do nothing in terms of our laws.
Rabbi Gordon, what about his father, who characterized his son's threat to kill everyone, including his family? He characterized it in a Vanity Fair article as a childish outburst. I mean, we still don't hear enough about these parents. And after the Columbine massacre, one of the parents of one of the killers, I forget whether it was Eric Harris's mother or Dylan Klebold's mother, she went and got her hair done the next day. Help me with that. Childish outburst. I mean,
being a parent, there's a responsibility that we have in every community to be aware of the wellness of our own children. There's a lot of denial. Many parents are in denial about their children being troubled, and they want to. They don't act. They don't act in, particularly in the extremes. This young man should have been at least hospitalized, or the police should have been aware of his danger, and certainly for the parent to go out and purchase the gun. Well, what happened in Kenosha with Kyle Rittenhouse? His mother bought him the gun and drove him from Antioch to Wisconsin across state lines. What did she think she was doing? What did she think she was doing with Kyle Rittenhouse? That he was going to go in and somehow join with white supremacists and fight the black community in Kenosha? What about that mother?
In fact, and the thing is the emergent theory of whiteness, white male Christians, by the sort of definition of Christianity. The group other than that on the hit list. Jews are not white male Christians. They've become as black as we are in the scheme of things. The mother religion, Judaism, is the mother religion of Christianity, but that. And so when they begin to target people who are not white male Christians, that jeopardizes all of us. I don't know how many kids attended the Trump rally in Washington. I got the spirits from that rally in Washington.
You know, Reverend, let me bring up Jennifer Bishop. You know, and we have three people who are part of that community. Jennifer Bishop, of course, we worked with for years, former national program director for victims and survivors. She indeed, her family, they are gun victim family survivors. She's from the Brady campaign, has been formerly with them, but you're always with them. What do you make of this, Jennifer? The childish outburst? What happened on Monday? What do you make of this?
Everything that everybody has said today is so true that, you know, there are troubled young men everywhere, but they don't get armed with assault weapons like we do in the United States. So we do have a gun culture problem. But I'm acutely aware, as someone who lives only literally a bike ride distance away from where this mass shooting happened. And 33 years earlier, my sister, her husband, and their baby were shot and killed by a teenage young man of a white, wealthy, privileged family who was obsessed with guns, who showed all the warning signs, and who, in fact, had tried to poison his own parents and shoot out little children in the front yard of their house with BB guns, point blank at the back of a second grader's head when he was 13 years old. And the parents let him have a locked bedroom after he committed multiple crimes, which the police had to be called when he was shooting out car windows with BB guns as a youngster, and that he ideated about all of these things and then tried to kill them. They finally took him to a psychiatric hospital where he was diagnosed as a dangerous sociopath, and they urged the parents to keep him in their treatment. And instead, the parents, who were very weak and very much in denial and just busy with their jobs, just let him come home. And 4 months later, my sister, her husband, and their baby are dead, who lived 2 blocks away from them. That he picked at random because their house was right by the police station, and he wanted to see what it would feel like to shoot somebody right under the police's nose. So it was heartbreaking to me because I am acutely aware of this parental responsibility problem right now. And the fact that in America, combine that in America with we just don't care about the gun issue enough to stand up to this powerful lobby that has bought and paid for our politicians. But we just let the assault weapons ban go. We have a ban on an assault weapon. There's no reason for, you know, you don't have to give up well-regulated, because that's what the Second Amendment says, well-regulated access to, you know, handguns or hunting rifles that are background checked on people every single time. That would be an okay culture to live in. But to put assault weapons out that only serve one purpose. They are not for hunting. They are not for target shooting. They're not for sport. They are for killing large numbers of human beings very, very quickly. And we need to ban those and stand up to the powerful gun lobby that buys and pays for our politicians.
Absolutely. And you need to call out Reverend, we've got less than a minute here. What we need to do is, Reverend, what I think we need to do is consider looking at who sponsors the gun lobby. Well, the NRA was bought out. They used to advocate for hunters. Now they advocate for gun manufacturers. They're the ones who have been excluded from this discussion, Rabbi Gordon and Jennifer Bishop and Aaron Connolly, Reverend Jackson. No one has called out Smith & Wesson and Beretta and all of these gun manufacturers who now own the NRA. Let's talk about it. Call us at 1-866-594-HOPE, and then meet us on Facebook Live on the Reverend Jesse Jackson Senior page, on YouTube, The Santita Jackson Show. Back in just a minute.
Your opinion counts. 1-866-594-HOPE. That's 1-866-594
Okay. May I speak with them? Okay, I
Yeah.
can. Reverend?
Yes.
Reverend, when you hear my voice, you know
yeah.
I'm looking at the clock. I've got to go to break, okay? You know
Okay.
you know this. Okay, we'll bring on Aaron Connolly. But I wanted to apologize to all of you today. Our system is not working. We're not able to get any. We're not even able to get any phone calls in. And I'm speaking to our Facebook Live and YouTube audience. Well, now there are no telephones. Okay. Now everything is up there somewhere in cyberspace. Really, we have to go through the computers for everything. And it is. I mean, it's just. We've been in this studio for a few months
Yeah, that
now.
wasn't an improvement in the technology, was it?
I promise you, it's just every week, every day. And the thing is, it's not helped by the fact that most people are still broadcasting from home. So the system is not tested enough, stressed enough to work out the kinks, I would imagine. So that's what we're dealing with here. So we came in this morning, and the first thing Jeremy had to do was get us up. Then he had to figure out how to open up some phone lines because we couldn't even get a reverend. So Jennifer and Aaron and Rabbi Gordon, my apologies to you for the tardiness of our outreach, but we were trying desperately to get on there. And then I couldn't even get an internet connection so I could get up on YouTube and Facebook with my morning stars. Yeah. Couldn't even figure that out today. So we're back here. Daddy? Daddy, take your time. What did you say? No, Dad, wait, back up now. Say Jennifer Bishop. You got to slow down. I know you think so fast.
Just not want to be focused this morning.
Dad?
Yes.
Stay focused. Stay focused and slow down. You've got to do that. Remember that. I need you that same energy you had when you came on the air. Slow down.
Well, Reverend, it's really good to be with you.
Stand by, everybody.
And I'm
Coming
looking
up.
forward to come to visit you.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. Hope that you will stay in touch with Reverend Jackson throughout the week at 773-FREEDOM, 773-FREEDOM. We have a wonderful program through our Push for Excellence program where we have our young people at Rainbow Push at 930 East 50th Street 6 days a week in the summertime, engaged in STEM and cultural programs. It's more than 100 of them. We do need your support. We want you to go to rainbowpush.org and join the movement. And please donate whatever you can. Not just money, but time. We need you to help us help our community. We're talking about the Highland Park shootings. We're talking about the ignored Gary shootings. We're talking about how it is the confessed killer, Robert Cremo III, was pulled over for a traffic stop peaceably. And yet Jalen Walker, Reverend Jackson, Rabbi Gordon, and Jennifer Bishop, and Aaron Connolly, that was the first thing Aaron said when she sent me a text. She said, how is it that Jalen Walker was shot 60 times, more than 60 times, shot at 90 times by 8 police officers? Reverend, first you and then you, Rabbi Gordon, please explain that. Reverend Jackson?
God explained two sets of rules. I called the mayor of Buffalo after 10 women had been killed at the grocery store. When we went to the airport, I found that probably 13 had been killed. 144 had been shot. And then just that was Uvalde, 21 killed. Not lost front pages. Then last week I was with the parents of Akron, Ohio, where a young man was killed, shot 50 times. It was determined to just kill him. Then the Highland Park. So it's just pervasive, it's everywhere. And the answer is more guns, more actually. There's a combination of people being mentally challenged. It's logically taught. These guns, they're the combination.
Well, Rabbi. Yes.
Yes, because these guns shoot down airplanes. They use them in Ukraine for that purpose. We send them these guns to airplanes. They shoot down train engineers. They like having nations who almost a death wish.
Well, Rabbi Gordon, what are the next steps? Because we were all horrified. Everyone just said, at least we get a chance to breathe on the 4th of July in the United States. Not at all. People were locked into their homes. What are we doing? And where do we go from here?
You suggest something else a little bit. One of the places we go, I think, is a sense of unity. Too often we live in bubbles, and it is certainly too easy for the privileged communities of America to look at the underprivileged communities and say that only happens there. And, Jennifer Bishop, who's on the line now, knows from her personal experience that her sister and her brother-in-law were killed in Winnetka, and Ricky Birdsong was murdered in Evanston, and Lori Dan was a killer again in Winnetka and Highland Park. That we are not protected by some perfect, privileged, gated community. That what happened in Highland Park, and we should also say the people of Highwood. Highland Park is not just a wealthy community. It encompasses a diversity as well. But it's too easy to see the gun violence of the inner city being something that happens somewhere else, and that the suburbs are somehow protected from this madness. We have to understand that we are all part of the same. We are all affected by the same illness, the same danger of these guns, and certainly the assault rifles, which the mass killing. But to say that there was a mass shooting in Gary that is largely ignored to the trauma of the mass shooting in Highland Park doesn't in any way lessen the trauma of Highland Park, but it should not be seen as something that is so anomalous that only happens in one place and rarely, when we have this happening all the time.
Aaron Connolly, what was your experience on Monday?
Thank you for allowing me to be part of this conversation, and thank you, Rabbi, for bringing up Highwood, where I live, and where I spent the day yesterday at our community library meeting with people who were at the parade, family members of victims of this terrible crime that buried their grandfather just yesterday. And I was able to sit with these little girls and get them some ice cream and read books with them and have them just see that people care, right? And we can't forget that our beloved community doesn't end at a zip code. It extends to Gary, it extends through our whole country. And we have to embrace the idea that our humans are hurting and need help. And yes, there are some mental health challenges, but we as leaders, activists, advocates, we can't forget that these gun manufacturers are given more power than our people, that their bottom line is right now more important than millions and millions of people and their liberty to go to the grocery store in Buffalo, to go to school in Texas, to go to a parade in Highland Park. And we have to really ask those hard questions and say, what are the laws that can be changed? And what are the habits and practices within our community that can change the value of the next generation? So they say, why are we giving gun manufacturers this power? This doesn't make sense. Why are they allowed to give our politicians money? And I hear from the teenagers on the teen advisory board at the library on Highwood, and I have hope. That's keeping my hope alive. When they're asking these hard questions, they're asking me, How do I become a community organizer? What do I need to do? How can we change this? This doesn't make sense. And that is what those conversations need to be cultivated in every community. And we have an opportunity to prevent the next crisis by doubling down on the resources in every community. And that's what my frustration has been, Santita, and you talk about it on your show, right? And the brilliant C.K. Hoffler begins many of our legal conversations around gun violence by naming the gun manufacturers, saying where they're headquartered, and asking people to reach out to their representatives to say, why are these corporations given more power than my family? And that needs to be at the forefront of the conversation.
Hey, Aaron, let me say
Yes,
to
sir.
you, many Congress people on 9,000 years of Congress person. What must the NRA they get from Congress? I mean, somebody gets 6 figures from NRA. It's
Right.
public corruption. It's NRA versus USA. And they're person in Congress people, like person in the item in the grocery store. I mean, more money from a lobby than the job itself.
Well, you know, Rabbi Gordon and Jennifer Bishop and Attorney Connolly and Reverend Jackson, we have not heard the name of one CEO, one chair of any board of any of the gun manufacturers, Rabbi. I mean, we've talked about the victims, we've talked about, well, we continue to shield the killers. I have a real problem with that. I think we need to know who they are and the forces that have shaped them. I mean, because they have a profile, and I think we need to know who's who and what's what. But why do you think they're being excluded from the conversation? Or are they being shielded from the conversation, Rabbi?
Well, I think our corporations are so dehumanized as institutions and are so sheltered from our awareness. Reverend Jackson was one of the very first people to get involved in stockholder initiatives. How many of our universities have stock in those companies? How many of our endowments, of our public philanthropies are invested in those corporations? And when those corporations become just part of huge conglomerates, and when most of the investments of these enormous institutions that really shape America are again hidden behind large investment groups, there is a place where there could be community action saying, let's disinvest from these corporations that own these gun manufacturers. And most of these gun manufacturers are not individual corporations. They're part of conglomerates. But that may be a place where we might have more of a voice. We are frustrated by the political voice. We're frustrated by the inability of our Congress to act because of how paralyzed it is because of this division between Republicans and Democrats, and we're not being able to. The voice of the people overwhelmingly is against AR-15s and assault weapons, but the politicians are not able, certainly from one side, to act on that. We need to also organize our institution, our key institutions, our foundations, our universities, the other institutions, the pension funds. We should be disinvesting from those corporations. We should be getting those corporations into bankruptcy.
Jennifer Bishop, yes, Reverend.
An action plan. We should ban the weapons. We should not only ban them, we should compensate them. A massive buyback program. Maybe we turn them in as a buyback program. Compensate them. These weapons, it's not being circulated at all.
Well, Jennifer Bishop, you have, worked with the Brady campaign, and uh, you have lobbied. What is the answer here? I mean, because we're not including the manufacturers in the conversation. Should they be there?
Change critically, and I'm a retired history teacher, so I'm always looking at the history of this. We had a couple of really bad turns that have enabled this to just explode into a much worse problem. One was the takeover of the National Rifle Association, which was a hobby sportsman club until the late 70s. And the corporations just weren't making enough money that manufactured them. And they took over the board of the NRA and have turned it into a lobbying wing where they buy politicians. And then we had the Citizens United decision of the Supreme Court a couple of years ago that gave the right of money to be speech. And that is to be able to effectively buy politicians and donate money to them without even the public being able to know who is donating money to these politicians. And it is critical that people vote and vote for people who are outspoken against the gun lobby, because that is a critical problem. We have an imbalance in representation in our country because of the way that we big state, small state controversy in our history that resulted in a Senate that gives Rhode Island the same number of senators as California. And then we have, gerrymandered districts that give rural voters a very heavy vote compared to urban areas. And we have to address those imbalances, and especially for Citizens United, we need to get money out of politics because we are buying, the gun lobby is buying these politicians because if they can put enough money into a campaign and buy TV commercials, then they can get people to be persuaded to vote for them. And that is what it has become to run for office in the country. We have all of these issues. Everywhere in the world, there are people with mental health issues. Everywhere in the world, there are disaffected young men. But we do have a unique problem with parents in America kind of dismissing things. And that's another conversation that I think is a very serious one. But in the end, we're the only country in the world that makes assault weapons and massive amounts of easy to procure weapons available to people who are troubled.
You're also dealing with people who taught the theory of whiteness, and women who not both going to remember that. Jews are not white males by the definition. They're not white male Christians. People of color as a threat to them. So for the great takeover by people of color, women and black Jews. So that theory is operating on a very high level in our country. In fact, the president had it. United States.
Well, before we go to break, I have about a minute. This has not been characterized as a hate crime, has it, Rabbi Gordon? And if it hasn't, that's okay.
So far, they've not decided what the motive was. They're not saying it's a hate crime, even though certainly there is some history of hate in this young man. There's some history of that, but they're not saying that that's the motive, and he's not expressed his motive. Reverend Jackson's absolutely right that there have been so many of these killings that have happened because of this grand replacement theory paranoia that not only views blacks and Hispanics and Asians and Muslims as a threat to white America, but particularly views the Jews as the manipulators of this, and that's what, and the ones who pull the strings and are the marionette runners. And that was the case in Pittsburgh at Tree of Life and in other places as well. And it certainly is the case in Buffalo. And so Reverend Jackson is right that that's part of it, but we don't know yet what motive this young man had in Highland Park. So far, it's not being called a hate crime. But let me say something else. it is felt like a hate crime by the victims. It is felt by as hate by those who now feel so vulnerable that you take a whole community that is so frightened that that I hear from my own congregants and their children and grandchildren, particularly the grandchildren, who are so terrified now, who aren't willing to be at home alone, who are afraid to go out, who will not go to another parade. Whatever the motivation was, the terror that was engendered in people who are the victims, not just the 7 who died or the 40 or so who were wounded. An entire community has been wounded, and an entire community is suffering, really suffering. This feeling that Aaron in Highwood and meeting the children in the library to see just how wounded people are.
Mm-hmm.
They feel that they've been hated.
Well, we got to talk about that, everybody. This resonates with everyone, everywhere. We're all paying attention to Highland Park. We were just with Uvalde. We were just before that with, not a week and a half before, with Buffalo. Got to talk about this, everybody. What's going on? Why are all of these mass shootings happening in America? There are a lot of reasons. We're going to talk about that with Reverend Jesse Jackson on Keep Hope Alive. Stay in touch with him throughout the week at 773-FREEDOM and rainbowpush.org. Back in just a minute.
Coming up, we'll have closing thoughts from Reverend Jesse Jackson.
Rabbi, how long can you stay with Reverend Jackson today?
The word is out. People are...
Oh, I'm sorry.
You tell me. I can certainly stay till 8.
Okay, well, that's perfect. If you'd like to get a closing comment on the other side.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. What's your name?
So
Okay.
let's go to 8.
My name is
Okay.
Paul Brooks.
Just, I'm sorry, we're
I've
trying
never
to
heard
answer
so many
the callers
lies
too.
coming
It's
from the
Send out
Jewish
one
guy.
moment, please. I'll be right back.
Where you calling from, Paul?
I'm in California, and I tell the truth. I don't lie. Have you ever told on this program? I've listened to it quite a bit. How the blacks got stolen from Africa and brought to the United States. It was the Jews, the Rothschilds. They won a war between blacks and whites, and you know that. I'll bet. They won't say it. Those guns don't pick themselves up and shoot. It's the money. It's the money that's doing it. And they're putting Jews. How about George Soros? His real name is Schwartz. They put politicians and district attorneys in every state, coast to coast, right now. We're trying to get rid of one out here in California that won't prosecute anybody. He's letting the crime go crazy.
All right.
And that's what's happening in all the states.
Okay, hold on.
This
Hold on.
just doesn't happen.
Paul.
Jacob Schiff. Do you ever hear of Jacob Schiff, sir?
All right, Paul, let me put you on hold. I just want to get your comments, and you can talk to Cynthia and Reverend Jackson. Hold on. All right, Keep Up Alive. What's your name?
This is Jim,
Jim, and where you calling from, Jim?
Syracuse, New York.
All right, what's your comment?
All the false information that I'm hearing this morning.
All right, hold on. I'll put you on with Santita and Reverend. Hold on, please.
Thank you.
All right, stand by. We're coming up
Okay,
in 15
Rabbi,
seconds.
Yes.
would you mind staying with us until just after the top of the hour? We've got two angry callers.
Yeah, sure.
I'd like for you to hear them and respond very quickly because you'll do it in a very and look, Reverend, we've got a minute.
Now.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. Keep those calls coming in, Jim and Paul. We're going to get to you as soon as we get on the other side of this break. I'm Santita Jackson. Of course, this is Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. 866-594-HOPE. 866-594-4673. Let's talk about what happened in Highland Park on the 4th of July, what happened in Gary on the 4th of July, what happened in Akron just before that. Jalen Walker pulled over for a traffic stop. 8 police shot at him 90 times, shot him more than 60 times. He was killed on a traffic stop, unarmed, no record. And yet these mass murderers, they're taken in alive, with the exception of Uvalde. Wow. What's going on, everybody? And what is going on with all the mass shootings in America? What are we doing? We've had more people killed than we've had days in the year in 2022. And it seems to be getting worse and worse. We're talking with Rabbi Sam Gordon, Reverend Jackson's brother beloved, just retired from the congregation Sukkot Shalom. And we've got Jennifer Bishop Jenkins, former National Program Director for Victims and Survivors. Indeed, she's a gun victim, family survivor herself. Attorney Erin Connolly, who is a resident of that, a member of that community. They all are. But we're going to be joined by some others, but we're going to get these calls from you, and the rabbi's going to answer you. Reverend Jackson, when we get back on the other side of the break, we're going to hear more from you. I'm Santita Jackson. Hopefully join me on WCPT throughout the week from 6 to 8 a.m. Central Standard Time. Back in just a minute.
Thank you for listening to Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. For more information on upcoming shows and guests, please visit our website at www.keephopealiveradio.com.
Ooh, okay. Thank you, Aaron. I just saw your note. Well,
You're welcome.
we got a lot going on today, so I am a little late with the notes. I'm sorry. What'd you say, Jeremy?
So do you want me to contact everybody else?
Yep. We're going to have John Nichols moving in as the rabbi moves out. But we're so glad that you're here. But I figured you will have a very measured response to these people who are so angry. When Jeremy told me we had some callers, I said, they're angry, aren't they? He said, oh, yeah. I heard them as I was going to get some of this coffee. Wow. It just seems like we have two just distinctly different views on this violence question. I mean, not just gun violence, but violence. Rabbi, and I'd love to talk with you about that one day, because I don't get it. I really don't get it. Reverend, slow down now.
And welcome to Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse
Daddy,
Jackson.
slow down.
The views
Remember,
and
get the
opinions of
rhythm
this
together.
program not necessarily
Rhythm.
the views of this station.
1,
District
2, come on.
Please speak with Reverend
If you
Jackson
can,
live.
clap your hand.
Toll free.
Stand by.
1-866-594-HOPE. That's 1-866-594-4673. And now, for Reverend Jesse Jackson.
Good morning, Attorney Patel. Please hold for Santita.
When you're down in trouble.
Welcome back to the second hour of Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. I'm Santita Jackson. Reverend Jackson, of course, this is his show. He's with us today, welcoming his brother beloved of decades, the retired head of the congregation Sukkot Shalom. I told you can't retire. We need you too desperately, Rabbi Sam Gordon. Of course, he welcomed Reverend Jackson to the Highland Park community this week as they had a healing ceremony, really a healing service from the same pulpit from which Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King preached. And what an honor it was for you to welcome Reverend Jackson to the same pulpit. Jennifer Bishop Jenkins, gun victim family survivor, former national director for victims and survivors of the Brady campaign, another resident of this community of Highwood. Indeed, one of the neighbors of this confessed killer, attorney Erin Connolly, one of the top uh, political organizers in the country. She's part of Rainbow Push and founder of uh, Covenant Strategies. And then, of course, we've got Reverend Dr. Todd Urey, pastor of the Douglas Memorial Community Church, the iconic church in Baltimore, Maryland, and attorney Robert Patillo, Southeastern Regional Director for Rainbow Push, brilliant lawyer for civil rights. And of course, John Nichols will be joining us in a hot second. But I wanted you to hear from at least one of these callers, Rabbi Gordon. Let's go to Paul Brooks. Paul from California. Paul, thank you so much for listening to us today.
It's, those guns just don't pick themselves up. He's made a lot of false statements. Do you know that the Jewish community guy named Jacob Schiff started the NAACP and owned it and ran it for the blacks for 60 years, trying to get blacks and whites to fight each other? They sold the Africans away from Africa and brought them up here, the Rothschilds, and sold them in the United States to be slaves. They don't tell you that. They own our currency. They own all of our media.
Paul, Mr. Brooks, I hear you, but we can't have that here. Well, no, it's just that it's number one, it's not true. Reverend Jackson.
Oh, it is true. And I can prove it. We can prove it. It's their money. It's what they're doing. They want the world to themselves.
Thank you.
I think that we cannot have that conspiracy theory that has been so rejected, the false story that of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion that then was promoted by Henry Ford, that has absolutely been shown to be a paranoid fantasy started by the Russian czars in Tsarist Russia. It is completely rejected. But there's a piece that I wanted to speak about. In terms of the African American Black community and the Jewish community, Highland Park became a permanent year-round community because Julius Rosenwald of the South Side of Hyde Park of Chicago had his summer home in Highland Park, and then the Chicago Symphony moved to have Ravinia as their summer home. But it was Julius Rosenwald who first brought basically the Jewish community to Highland Park, and Julius Rosenwald established the Rosenwald schools throughout the South. Schools for the Black community throughout the South. Julius Rosenwald was a great Jewish philanthropist, head of Sears Roebuck Company, but the Rosenwald schools had a lasting impact on Black literacy in the South, where Blacks were not allowed to go to school. And there's a connection between Julius Rosenwald's role in Highland Park and Julius Rosenwald's role in the South. We are so deeply connected, and that we have to remind ourselves of our connections, and that what happens in Highland Park and what happens in Gary and what happens in Englewood, it affects all of us. And what happens at Mother Emanuel Church and what happens at Tree of Life Synagogue connects us.
Well, that's why when I hear Mr. Brooks, Rabbi Gordon, that's why I'm not convinced that this is not a hate crime in some way. I just
irritate.
Yeah, it's what it's aroused and what it quite honestly what it made me feel when I heard that it was Highland Park. I said, "Are you serious on the 4th of July at this time? This is horrible." And it was very unsettling to me. It's just, when Reverend Jackson.
Hate crime a hate crime.
Okay.
I don't need permission to call the hate crime a hate crime. And playing hate crime, playing Jewish people in Highland Park. You know, Baker's not on the corner in Highland, but neighbors, they're always by Neiman Marcus.
Reverend Jackson?
Kind of was
Okay. Well, I mean, Reverend Jackson makes the point you don't need permission to call a hate crime a hate crime. There's something that's not right about this. Before we go to break, uh, yep,
Say really quick,
yes.
an alert yesterday that there was the Patriot Front was in Highland Park and Skokie and Highwood and other communities passing out anti-Semitic flyers and using this as a tool for hate. And our residents were warned to not go to certain vigils and protests and to have an exit plan in case it was violent. So I just want to note that these folks are coming to our communities during this time of grief and causing additional and stoking hate crimes.
Rabbi Gordon is going to have to leave. I want to give him closing thoughts. Rabbi, I had no idea that Mr. Brooks was going to say that. I had none. So for any offense that you might have drawn, please accept my profound apologies.
But it's a demonstration of the sickness that exists in this country, and how it has been allowed and promoted by others, particularly in the last administration. That there was a permission for this kind of the idea that people would walk in to our Capitol with Nazi flags and Confederate flags into the United States Capitol tells us that there's something that's very dangerous going on in our country. Whether this was a hate crime or not, as I said before, people feel hated. People feel vulnerable. People are frightened. And I think it was, what was it, Jennifer or
Aaron?
Or Aaron, I'm sorry. Aaron, who the alert in Highland Park and Highwood about some of these right-wing groups, that it should remind us of how we share we share a narrative, and that narrative should be one of hope and freedom and equality, and that's what we have to fight for, as well as for a society that doesn't permit the level of hatred and then the access to these high-powered assault weapons, which are meant only for the purpose of killing people. So it's a perfect storm. It's a perfect storm of hatred that has been built up in the last number of years, and then the access to the means to kill so many people and destroy lives. That's the perfect storm that we're dealing with right now.
Everyone, we want you to continue to call us at 866-594-HOPE, 866-594-4673. Rabbi Sam Gordon, we thank God for you. We are so pleased that you have a little bit more time since you are no longer heading the congregation Sukkot Shalom. More time to be with the rest of us. Now the world can have all of you. We just love.
That's very kind of you, but retirement does not mean that I stopped caring and stopped working and stopped being an activist. And I just want to again say how important it was for Reverend Jackson to be in Highland Park on Wednesday night to demonstrate, standing at the pulpit where Dr. King spoke, to demonstrate his commitment and the commitment of the entire community to each other. We are tied to each other in good times and also in the bad times.
Well, thank you for being so kind. You don't know what you did, not only for his spirits, but for all who came to Highland Park with him. It was so wonderful to be embraced. And hope that we can continue to grow so that it won't take this kind of tragedy for us to really understand that we all need each other and we're all together. Love you so much. Rabbi Gordon, can't wait to have you back on my show. I promise you it will not be in the 6 a.m. hour. It'll be at the 7. Oh, I need you to interpret this for us because we certainly do need it. We certainly do need it. As you can hear, Attorney Aaron Connolly said, they are now passing out hate literature in this pained community. Wow. And just think about it. Peyton Gendron had not planned to stop at the Tops grocery store. He had done reconnaissance. He had planned to go through the black community and murder as many people as he had the ammunition to do. I mean, what is going on here? Let's talk about it on Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson, 866-594-HOPE, 866-594-4673. And if you want to combat this ugliness and move toward the creation of a beloved community, I want you to join us in Operation Push at Rainbow Push, at the Rainbow Push Coalition. Call us at 773-FREEDOM. We need volunteers. And we want you to go to rainbowpush.org and join us. Join Jennifer Bishop Jenkins and Attorney Aaron Connolly and Rabbi Gordon and Santita Jackson and John Nichols, who's one of the founding members, and Reverend Dr. Chadiri, our Vice President, and our Southeastern Regional Director, Robert Patillo. Back with more of Keep Hope Alive in just a minute.
Your opinion counts.
Rabbi Gordon, thank you so much.
For Hope. That's 1-866-594-4673.
Rabbi Gordon, thank you so much. Reverend Jackson, you want to say something to the rabbi before he leaves?
Okay. Yeah. Well, you really honored all of us. It meant a lot. You're inspirational. Thank you, sir. All right. Everyone be well. Thank you.
God bless you and thank you so much.
Okay, stay in touch.
No, of course, absolutely.
All right, be well.
God bless you. Have a wonderful day.
You
And
too.
our love to everyone in Highland Park and Highwood. Please convey that.
For sure. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. I have a question to ask you after this. Okay. Okay.
Thank you. Do you still want a song?
Yes. Where are you going? I think when Jennifer sees me now, John Nichols, she's gonna start avoiding my phone calls. She never does, and we still have to get together for lunch. Oh, I think she's gonna run away from me. I've had her talking about
I'm so grateful to you all for taking on these issues.
No.
If you try to get away, you will find her.
Well, yeah, well, John hasn't been able to get away for 40 years. That's why you're hearing a little bit of disgruntledness, if you will.
No, there's disgruntledness.
Oh, I'm having fun with you. My parents got him when he was but a pup. Jennifer, he was part of the first campaign, and my parents were wondering what this child, because he doesn't look his age now, and he really looked like a child then. They're like, what is this little boy doing here? He looks like a baby. My mother kept saying, he just looks like a baby. He's a baby. And you were just about that now. Come on. You were. And so that unsettled her. Yeah, that was her, and that was yours too. We got to take care of this baby. Well, no, he did not. She wanted to. Did you think he ate today? Oh my gosh. Well, those are the things that you think about. Just my mom's a mom. I'm like, okay, got my kids out here doing this, and boy, we've been together a long time, John Nichols.
We have, but you have a kid going to Congress now.
Another. Praise the Lord.
That's pretty good. Pretty good.
God has been very good, and people have been very, very kind.
It's important.
They've been kind.
Well, the art keeps bending in the right direction.
Well,
For all the challenges that we face and all the trauma of our midst it, there's some good news along with the bad.
you're right. You're right.
Yep. And we have to recognize that. It's probably, I'm hearing so much disappointment, so much frustration with people that have responsibility to recognize that amidst it all there's evidence of progress.
Well, you know what?
And fuck it out. Highlight it.
Well, stand by. We're coming up. I want you to lift us up. Everyone, you must know that John is also a lay preacher. So Just know that too. He's unlicensed, but he keeps. My father's gonna say that to you. You know that, and Pastor Yuri. Daddy, slow down. You're doing so well. Wait a minute. Slow down. Catch up. Yeah, okay, lay lawyer. Okay, that's right, Dad. Just slow down and catch up. Okay? Because he's doing extremely well this morning.
He always. Well, I only need about another 20 or 30 years out, and then he can relax.
Look, oh, please. All he wants to do is get to the All-Star game today. He wants to see some sports.
That's the goal.
Oh, gosh. That's why he's trying to sound great right now. So my mother can say, oh, he can go. Stand by. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson, joining attorney Aaron Connolly, Jennifer Bishop, formerly of the Brady campaign. I can't say formally because that is, you never leave those out. Those organizations really are mission driven. Of course, Aaron Connolly's Rainbow Push, Covenant Strategies, one of the nation's premier, one of the top political organizers, activists, and analysts. Indeed. We have got Reverend Dr. Todd Yuri Esquire, Southeastern Regional Director for Rainbow Push, and he is also the pastor of the iconic Douglas Memorial Community Church. And who preceded him? Senator Raphael Warnock. Great church. Attorney Robert Patillo, who will be on WAOK later today on one of those popular talk shows in the country, the Robert Patillo Show on WAOK from 1 to 4 Eastern Standard Time. But Reverend Jackson, we're welcoming to the show John Nichols, national correspondent for The Nation magazine. They're just so there. I don't even know which book to pick that you have written, John Nichols, that would fit at this moment. I mean, as we're fighting for the soul of the Democratic Party, it seems that we're fighting for the soul of America, indeed of our world, as we look at what happened to Shinzo Abe. In a nation of 126 to 127 million people, they average about 10 gun deaths a year. And indeed, those deaths are ascribed to organized crime. You can't get a gun in Japan. You have to go through so many hoops. People just don't even bother. That's just not what they do. And yet he was killed in the middle of the street giving a speech. What about Highland Park? What about the Gary shooting, Reverend Jackson, that we haven't heard about?
One day you give unlimited access to guns, open carry. It's a take away the access to abortion for women. So this is madness in leadership. And President Biden's going to use every power he has. Many people use executive privilege as well as the filibustering and that's fight to fight.
Wow.
So,
John Nichols, I mean, what can the president do? What should he do? He is really having a hard time with his presidency, with his popularity. If it's not inflation, now we've got all of these mass shootings. I don't know which came first, the chicken or the egg. Help me with that. Help us with all of this. What do you see here?
Well, I don't have philosophy degree, so I will not attempt to figure out the chicken and the egg conundrum. But I will. When you ask what the president of the United States should do, the answer is more. And I underline that word and put an exclamation mark after it, because the fact of the matter is that at this point, the United States as a whole is in a very traumatic spot, it's a very traumatized spot. We've just gone through, now we're in the third year of a rolling pandemic that hasn't gone away, that keeps resurfacing. Now we hear of another surge, more people hospitalized. And so we've got that, and that's enough. That's more than enough to deal with as a country. But then you add onto it an incredible surge of gun violence. And it's highlighted, the incredible thing about it is we have not had a week since spring, not a week that has gone by without a headline-grabbing, nationally significant, mass shooting. right? And Highland Park stood out for reasons that have been well discussed on this show and because it occurred on July 4th. But the fact of the matter is people know they're shooting in Gary and Uvalde and city after city, town after town. It is a universal crisis, and yet we don't have the level of action that is necessary. A little bit of congressional action, but not enough. And then on top of that, on top of those realities which jar us, we have inflation, and inflation is easily one of the cruelest of economic patterns because even when we work hard as we possibly can, we end up with less money than we used to make when we weren't working many hours. And so we're on all these bad spirals. You put all those things together and they say, yeah, and we still haven't dealt with structural racism in this country. We still haven't dealt with anti-Semitism in this country. We still haven't dealt with the climate crisis. We still haven't dealt with rampant economic inequality that allows a handful of people to have more wealth than the vast majority of Americans. And so when you put all those things on the table, you say, look, no president is able to solve every problem, but anyone who has sought the presidency of the United States, who has sought this office, cannot serve as a manager. You cannot serve as someone who says, oh, yeah, I clock in at 9 a.m. and clock out at 5, and whatever papers come over my desk, I'll review them, and maybe I'll meet with some people and do that. That is not what America needs in a president. Not now, not ever. What America needs in a president is someone who seizes every bit of power that office has to do good for the American people. And the fact of the matter is that because we have a problem in our Congress, it is dysfunctional and does not act at the Senate level, even though Democrats have a functional majority, but not a useful majority. The president has to begin to use executive orders. Those executive orders should protect a woman's right to choose. They should protect people in our communities so that we are safe from gun violence. They should address the climate crisis. They should address structural racism. They should address economic inequality. And I know full well that the president can't solve all those problems. But I do know that on a daily basis, the president of the United States should be sending out messages that every American understands, that every American hears, and that every American feels, that there's a sense of urgency and action coming from the office. And yes, if the president deals with gun violence through executive orders, is it possible that a court will throw out some of what he's done? I understand that. That can happen. If the president deals with reproductive rights, the woman's right to choose, with an executive order, might a court try to throw it? Yes, I understand that's possible. But I promise you, if the president takes bold action, if the president leads at this time, even if he is pushed back, even if he's thwarted in some action, the American people will feel a sense of urgency and connection. It will be good.
I'd rather lose fighting the right war than win fighting the wrong one.
Mm.
You got to take it in your own hands and fight the right fight.
Well, and John Nichols, that appears to be the point, but many people are stymied by the president's inaction. I am so glad that he has an executive order on reproductive rights. But what about voting rights? Max Myrick out of D.C. said, wait a minute, we're not even talking about that anymore. We're in the midst of a 2022 midterm season where it is projected that Democrats are going to get wiped out. I mean, what is going on here?
Look, voting rights ought to be something that a president has immense power to act upon. Remember, John Kennedy in the early 1960s, who was not the greatest leader on civil rights, but still he recognized the need, and his brother Robert Kennedy, to take action as regards discrimination and challenges in the South. Lyndon Johnson, who did in fact become a great leader on civil rights, took immense action on voting rights in the South, coming out of the executive branch. So we have to recognize that the executive branch has powers in this regard, and certainly has powers to take out a territory. Then if it's fought out in the courts, so be it. But at least you've signaled the right message. And if I can throw one other thing as regards the urgent reality of these times, We have a tremendous number of Americans who are being over by gas prices, by food, by housing prices. Inflation, as well as just economic inequality, is really a crisis at this moment. There's simply no question of that. And the President of the United States should issue an executive order tomorrow morning barring price gouging, literally saying that if price gouging is identified, that will be prosecuted, and it will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law by the U.S. Department of Justice. And that if President Biden were to make a big deal of that, going after the fossil fuel companies, going after food processors, going after anybody who is making huge profits and still raising prices on working class people, I promise you that would have huge resonance with a great many voters, with a great many Americans. But you have to have a sense of action. As the Reverend says, he's so right about this. Better to lose fighting the right fight than to win fighting the wrong.
Reverend Jackson, I have 2 minutes before we go to break.
And then very clear to me that we must fight the right fight with courage, not just information, but also courage to fight the right fight. We're looking now at a situation where the right to vote preserves all other rights. The Heller Holder thing came to the Obama administration. Then responded to it with great mass action. What's different between today and last season's in the Reconstruction? We had no tools. We have tools to fight back now.
We do have tools to fight back.
The vote. Obama and Biden have not put the problems on that right.
Well, hold on, Reverend. I've got 1 minute, John Nichols. What about an executive action on the voting rights?
Absolutely.
1 minute.
Here's the bottom line. What the President of the United States should do is say there's a lack of clarity about some aspects of the Voting Rights Act, an act signed by President Johnson. And so the courts have created confusion about this. Shame on them. But as President of the United States, Biden should say, I will try to do my best to remove that confusion. And so issue an executive order that clarifies that efforts made to diminish the right to vote, to undermine the right to vote, will be immediately challenged by the Department of Justice, and that they are illegal, they are barred in the United States. Now, of course, they'll be challenged in the courts, but the fact of the matter is, when some state legislature or some local official tries to limit early voting, which is so important, tries to limit those polls, tries to limit easy registration, easy voting. In my state of Wisconsin, just this week, we had a ruling from the state Supreme Court that banned drop boxes. That's ridiculous.
Well, just hold it, because see, that story almost got missed while we're looking at the mass shootings. Oh, that's massive. Got a lot to talk about. John Nichols, Reverend Yeary, Robert Patillo, Jennifer Bishop Jenkins, Attorney Aaron Connolly, along with Reverend Jesse Jackson. We'll be right back. And the callers, Jim and Chaparral, back in just a minute.
Your opinion counts. 1-866-59.
All right.
And you know what? Biden could issue an executive order tomorrow saying that it is possible to states that are using ballot drop boxes.
But why won't he do it?
Order. And if they want to sue, if they want to fight on that, so be it. But boy, what a great fight. What a great fight that the President of the United States said, I want to make it easy for you to cast a secure, efficient vote. Any American, people with disabilities, people who are afraid of going to a crowded place, COVID, people who are busy and they're working during the day, except that they use a ballot drop box. That orders the President of the United States. And then if the other side wants to try to block that, have that fight. Be the President of the United States that argue for easy, efficient, fair, and safe voting against people that want to make voting difficult.
Robert, Reverend Dr. Todd Yeary, Esquire, Jennifer Bishop Jenkins. What, Daddy? Reverend?
start doing so after that. He's off
Daddy, you got to slow down. Remember that.
the
You all, I'm
lieutenant
doing therapy with Reverend on the air, and I'm gonna keep. Well, no, I'm
You're
gonna
a
keep
good
on.
daughter.
Well, you know what? I love him, but I also understand him in history, and particularly now. No, no leader of his stature and inclinations has lived this long. Maybe we have to go back to Frederick Douglass, Reverend Dr. Geary, to see someone who's been allowed to live this long. I mean, everybody else who got into this century, they got taken out. Reverend Otis Moss Jr., Reverend Otis Moss III's father, said part of Reverend Jackson's genius is the genius for survival. And it is that. So there's still a lot that he has to teach. And I think God is slowing down, not your mind, your tongue, because we're all waiting to hear it. And so, as someone who's trained in the voice, just as a singer, I'm clear on what's going on, and I just wanted to slow down so everybody can hear him. Okay, Daddy? That's why you can't be reverend here. You have to be my father. And that's what he'll respond to. Otherwise, he's not going to listen to me. You guys, stand by. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. Before we get to the callers, Reverend Jackson, I want to bring on, some of the people who you are mentoring along with everybody else, along with attorney Aaron Connolly, Jennifer Bishop Jenkins, who you've been working with for 30 years. Wow. And John Nichols, of course, national correspondent for The Nation magazine. We first met up in 1983 during the Jackson campaign. Yes. Let me start with you, Robert Patillo. Will you be talking about this or anything like this on your radio show on WALK this afternoon from 1 to 4?
Well, absolutely. We're going to have Dean Heller from the Heller decision, which codified in 2014 the individual right to own a firearm. He's going to be on our show today at 2 o'clock talking about the recent Supreme Court gun decision. And I think we have to put all this into context of what's going on currently internationally. This week, we saw the assassination of Shinzo Abe, the former Japanese prime minister, but that also concurrent with that, we saw the government in Sri Lanka collapse. The people raided the prime minister's palace. The president is in exile currently. Within the last 2 weeks, we saw the Israeli government collapse. They're now calling for the fifth set of elections in the last 2 years. We saw the British prime minister have to resign, but currently pulling a Trump and refuses to leave office, despite that being standard protocol. We've seen the traditional role of leadership in the EU, which Angela Merkel consolidated in Germany. We've seen Olaf Scholz be a very weak German leader. And we've also seen in France, Macron nearly go down to their version of the French Trump there in France. That is all to say that the entire world currently is on the prefaces of a changing of the guard. We're seeing that new alliances are forming. We're seeing there's the same sort of instability that we see here in America. We're seeing in almost every major nation around the world. So we need to, as Americans, take our gaze off of simply the micro issues, which exist here in America, to look at the macro issues going on around the globe and where we fit into that. Internationally, poor people around the world are standing up saying we're no longer going to take high fuel prices, high energy prices, high inflation, and continuous wars that seem to only benefit the upper classes. And we're seeing governments around the world collapse because of the inability of their people to handle that. And we have to make sure our government understands that the same thing can happen in America. They do not put together the type of public policy solutions that are needed to address the needs of the American people. And right now, the ineffectiveness of our government, their either inability or lack of desire to address voting rights, to address gun violence, to address climate change, to address economic inequality, is taking us down the same path as we've seen in nations around the world just in the last couple of weeks. And we have to ensure that if we don't want our government to have the same fate as Sri Lanka, that we get people in office who are ready to really activate for the people. And right now we don't have that.
Absolutely. And I think we have to be mindful of the fact that we could And we have to be mindful of the fact that when we look at Sri Lanka, which just declared bankruptcy this week, with the people rushing the presidential palace, this economic instability, particularly in the Western world as the global South is on the ascendancy, is something of which we must be mindful. I'm so glad that Dr. Matt Harrington has called in. We're going to take some of these calls, Reverend Jackson, with your permission, so that you can react to them. We'd like you to keep your comments a little brief, everybody, so that we can get right to you. Let me start with Jim. Your comment or question?
Good morning, and thank you for taking my call.
Thank you, Jim.
A lot of false information this morning. You can like guns, you don't like guns, I'll support whatever you want, but spreading misinformation is not nice.
For example, these guns are only for killing people. I would invite you, as we speak, to go to Camp Perry in Port Clinton, Ohio. The World Series of all shooting events is occurring as we speak. You can Google it, you can drive out there, they take the public. Imagine the thrill of competing against the United States Marine Corps team, or the United States Army team, or any team for that matter. I have a couple gold medals, a couple silver, and a bronze medal from competing out there. It's a thrill. And how did this get enacted? 1903, President Roosevelt. You can research this yourself as well. He did an audit of the United States and thought, holy cow, our kids don't know how to shoot. So you can go to Camp Perry, they will loan you a gun, and you can compete. If you want, you can bring it home, buy it, bring it home. And let me ask you a question. Why did the Japanese not invade our mainland?
Why?
Every resident had a gun tucked in their closet. They were scared to death of Americans. Oh my God, they have shooting events. They were scared to death of that we had firearms and knew how to use them.
Okay, well, John Nichols, your response?
You know, some very important points, valid points, but every resident had a gun in their closet. In fact, we had a lot less proportionally then than we have now. And the fact of the matter is that I come from rural Wisconsin, a place with a great hunting culture. And while we have had guns, I certainly had my house growing up. My grandfather had. They were for hunting. They were locked away. And yeah, I understand the point the caller is making, that perhaps in some terrible circumstance, a well-regulated militia might be necessary. But that's got nothing to do with what we're talking about now. We're not talking about a well-regulated militia. We're not talking about defending the country. We're talking about we're a handful of people. A handful of people are highly, and at least a few of them use those arms against American people, against human beings in Highland Park, to kill innocents, to kill, people in their 80s just coming to a parade. Talking about a guy who was heavily armed in my hometown of Madison, Wisconsin, after he shot up Highland Park and considered shooting at parades in Madison. He chose not to. He just left his phone up here to try and throw investigators off. But you should understand, on the day this guy came to, heavily armed, had already killed people in Highland Park, I was at a parade with my 91-year-old mother and with a group of children under 5 from my neighborhood. And anyone who thinks that it's in the least bit acceptable that this madman, heavily armed, should be able to get anywhere near that parade where my mother is entertaining a group of little kids, that's madness. And we should not begin to entertain that sort of madness in this country.
Reverend Dr. Yuri, your thoughts?
All of my colleagues on the panel this morning. I think you touched so many different bases. I think the intersection with all of this is when John Nichols says we have a functional majority with the Democratic Party in the Senate. It is really a dysfunctional majority and a procedural one at best.
Yeah.
This is really about what is ultimately the right of the people to assert themselves, to make sure their voices are heard. This election is the most critical election in our lifetime, right? The next one is going to be the most critical one after that. We have to remain current and not make this about splitting hairs. If we don't show up, we will continue to see the erosion of the fundamental rights of people. When we talk about access to guns and the insanity that has come from the court, we often talk about this notion of the militia and the right to bear arms shall not be infringed, but we leave out those two words that John just repeated a couple of times, and it's well regulated. Well, what does well regulated mean if there are not reasonable constraints on access, which actually the late Justice Scalia actually indicated? It is not an open-ended right for everybody to run loose, at least up until now. Now, basically what you have created is a borderline open carry society subject to whatever the states will think they can do. In Maryland, the governor just issued an executive order saying that petitions for concealed carry permits shall not require a justification. That was one of the baselines that allowed the Maryland State Police, after doing the background check, to see whether or not there was really a credible threat that would warrant someone having a concealed carry. Otherwise, you don't conceal carry for a militia. The militia in the United States today is the National Guard, regulated by the state under the Department of the Military. So we cannot get into these kind of insane arguments if we're not going to show up to vote to reinforce this dysfunctional majority with numbers and with courage and with presence and with persistence. And Santita, you and I talk about this all the time. It cannot just be the federal agenda. We've got to show up when the state ballots are in play, because it is really the state laws that are the most dangerous and pernicious laws being passed in this country. And they are modeling after each other, knowing that they've got federal cover.
Hey, Chaparral, what's on your mind today? Your quick comment or question? Okay, do we have Chaparral?
Thank you so much. I'm sorry, I was on mute.
No, that's
We must
okay.
have a plan.
Listen, I just want to make sure that everyone understands that not only what happened in Highland.
Wait. Reverend, do you hear the caller?
Sometimes we can't hear the phone.
Oh, okay.
Some of it's not coming through quite clearly.
Oh, okay. Can you hear her now? Chaparral?
Yes, I'm here, Santita.
Okay, please. Your comment or question?
Okay. Yes. I was saying what happened in Highland was a tragedy. 7 people were killed, over 40 shot. But that same weekend, 83 were shot in Chicago and 13 killed, and no one has said a word. We are under siege here in Chicago. We are being attacked by unknown assailants, because unlike Highland Park, they have the assailants. But in Chicago, we do not know a description of the assailant. This morning, I wake up to 4 being shot in near North, mass shooting again. And we are not talking about the community violence that's touching Chicago. And everybody is so concerned with Highland Park, as they should be. But 13 people were also killed in Chicago last weekend. And no one has said a word. Not a GoFundMe, not a march, not anything for the parents who have lost their children last week. What's so shocking about what's going on in Chicago, Santita, is that 95% of the people being killed are under 30. Mm. And they're also Black and Latino. Not a whole bunch of white people are being murdered in Chicago. But the silence is deafening. And I keep bringing this up because I also experienced this tragedy. And I'm still seeking justice 6 years later for my son, Courtney, who was killed back in 2016. And we still don't know who killed him. So when we have this deafening silence, not only from the state, not only from the government, our lives matter. And we have to begin to scream on the mountain hills about our Black and brown children being murdered senselessly in the streets, because that's where the new voters are going to come from. Because if they don't make it to 18, who is our next generation that's going to be voting? We won't have anyone. So we have to look at this holistically and really begin to dig deep about what's happening here. I personally think that a lot of this is very sinister, and we have serial killers running around in Chicago, but we can't prove it. But we need help out here on these streets, Santita, and we need to bring light to what's happening. Don't glaze over the 87 people that were shot in and 13 dead.
Sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. No. Thank you. We've got Dr. Matt Harrington. Of course, we were all stirred by his words at the Rainbow Push Convention, minister, but also he is really looking to do something about this particular issue. He is the head of the CEO of the ammo coding system and the founder of Lines for Lives. I've got 2 minutes before I go to break, Dr. Harrington. I'm so glad you were listening this morning. What's the solution, you say, legislatively?
Legislatively, right now, we should be passing HB 3088, which is the mandate of serialization of ammunition, so we can track back that bullet to the supplier, not just the shooter. Because they only care about the Benjamins. They don't care about Ben and his friends that want to go up past the age of 10. They bring this destruction and insane. I mean, the mass shootings that we have in Chicago, it's Chicago normal. I mean, let's talk some real numbers. Since 2015, when introduced this legislation, Sonia Harper, the sponsor of this, has sat on it, done more for people getting pot in 1 year than the thousands that have been shot over the last 5 years. J.D. Pritzker knows about this. He decides to sit down and says, oh, background checks. I point out that people have passed background checks, buying the ammunition and selling to the gang members. Unless you believe in magical elves and gnomes making free ammunition and giving it away, then somebody bought it, somebody loaded it, somebody shot it, and we have the 21st century technology to trace it right back to those suppliers and make sure that gun violence goes down and take the profit out of this.
Is that what before I go to break, is that where the ammo coding comes into place? I got 30 seconds.
That's right. Ammo coding system is nothing more than Microsoft. We put serial numbers on the base of the bullet and the casing and tie that into the barcode that's on the boxes that go out for sale.
You know what, everybody, I want you to, during the break, when you talk to everybody who's still on Facebook Live, I want everyone to react to you. I mean, because look, Robert Cremo left the rifle behind. I cannot help but believe that that's how they were able to track him. He left the rifle behind. Who does that? This is rough. I mean, he left it behind and walked right on through the crowd and drove to another state, came back home and was arrested, and he's alive. And Jalen Walker from Akron, Ohio, arrested for a traffic stop, running away from the police. And if you know the behavior of the police and black men, you understand why. But 8 of them shot at him 90 times, hitting him more than 60 times. How does that happen? Who does that?
Subjects that had the mass shooting, right?
they pulled them out, and as if it was a traffic stop. They didn't treat those kids like Swiss cheese. I mean, they put 60 bullets into a poor child. That's not a good look for anyone.
Well, it happened, and it's a regular occurrence. Sadly, we're going to have some more thoughts from everybody. I want you to stay in touch with Reverend Jackson throughout the week at rainbowpush.org. Please join the movement and come on by Push. We have got more than 100 children who are in a learning camp, if you will, sponsored by the Push Excel program. We could only do it with your support. More than 100 people, young people, 6 days a week, giving them not just something to do, but something to learn, I hope you'll join me on the WCPT and AM 950 radio, the voice of Progressive Minnesota, throughout the week, 6 to 8 a.m. Back with more of Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. Stay right here on YouTube on the Santita Jackson Show and on the Reverend Jesse Jackson Senior page, because we're going to talk a little bit just after we get off the air. Back in just a minute.
Coming up, we'll have closing thoughts from Reverend Jesse Jackson right here.
Hey, everybody, why don't you react to having, coding these bullets? What do you think about that, Jennifer?
It's just another gimmick. The gun industry loves to think of new ways to, market things, and we love to try to come up with gimmicky ways in response to try to deal with the problem. But its problem is much more basic, and that is money in politics and the ownership of the NRA, of these elected officials, and people not knowing who's giving them this money. And they are voting for people who seem to say the right things to them, but secretly are just taking tons of money from these elected officials from the gun industry, and then voting to do their owners' biddings. And that is why we are worse than any other country in the world.
But do you think we should be able to track the bullets? I mean, they're the
microstamping the micro marking of bullets is a huge, potentially helpful law enforcement investigative tool. And yeah, we should absolutely do all of that.
Now, let me explain. Microstamping and serialization is two different things. Serialization of ammunition is right at the manufacturer, so that's on every bullet. Microstamping is only on the continuous new gun lines that is specific to that one gun. That's why serialization works for every gun, from registered to ghost guns, from small guns to long guns.
Here's the practical challenge with any kind of identification on ammunition in the current legal frame. In some states, you can just walk in with a government-issued ID to establish that you're over age to purchase ammunition. And so if we're not going to connect, so you could have fundamentally a straw purchase, you could have a connection between someone who may not be able to legally have ammunition to get it. So I think we have to drill down and make sure that we don't have a great big donut hole in the middle of good intentions and an otherwise good process. And if we don't close them, as the Supreme Court just did it to us last week, now we have to literally go state by state, because as we go with the regulation of handguns themselves, I think you may have a similar legal challenge in the courts around how do you restrict access to the ammunition, which is what I'm all for that. One of the things that I would say very early on, Santita, with the selling of AR-15, the 5.56 round, which is the caliber of a round that goes in an M16, was never designed for self-defense. It was designed for the battlefield, for maximum lethality from a small arms weapon. And so if we don't start thinking, I appreciate it's a great start, and I think it has great potential. But I think based on what the courts have said in terms of who can and who can't and what restrictions can be placed, if we don't look at the state law implications of the Supreme Court's interference in reasonable gun control short of some federal action, I think we're going to run into a lot of difficulty with the current 6-3 court.
Actually,
And
in 1968,
just
let me just say this one thing.
There are, 4 parts to any cartridge. You have the primer, you have the brass casing, you have the powder, and then you have the projectile. Are we talking about sterilizing the actual projectile or just the casing?
Actually, yes. The projectile and the casing are sterilized, and it's multiple micro laser engraved. They have been tested already by the California Department of Justice and the San Bernardino Sheriff's Department in conjunction with the NSA. And they've tested thousands of rounds into concrete, plywood, and other things.
Matt?
100% effective.
Hold on 1 second, because we're only going to have about a minute and a half. Reverend?
To Reverend Jesse Jackson at KeepHopeAliveRadio.com.
Hey, everybody, throughout the week, please stay in touch with Reverend Jesse Jackson at rainbowbush.org. We need people to join the organization. I want 30 seconds for you, Reverend Dr. Uri, and you, Attorney Robert Patillo. First, you, Attorney Patillo, who will be on WAOK this afternoon from 1 to 4 Eastern Standard Time. Why should people join PUSH, Rainbow PUSH?
PUSH as the lobbyist for the people. When it comes to bringing the conversations that we have on this platform and in the community before those individuals of power, PUSH as that singular organization that can bring our issues to people who have the opportunity to change them. We do encourage you to go to rainbowpush.org, join the organization, get involved, help to fight back.
Reverend Dr. Uri, 30 seconds for you.
Rabbi Heschel defined freedom as the liberation from the tyranny of a self-centered ego. Justice requires that we not be self-centered, but really be willing to sacrifice on behalf of our fellow human beings. Now's the time to step up, not back down, and keep hope alive.
Reverend Jackson, the last 30 seconds belong to you.
In St. Peter, we have a shooting in Akron, Ohio. The funeral will be this coming Wednesday. He'll be laid to rest. And meeting his family, they don't have insurance. There are poor people working with them. Rainbow PUSH is. Bishop Grant's been working with them. Each in Highland Park will not go away. But see, Highland Park may be the host of a great mass demonstration of Black Latino Asians, a gigantic Rainbow Coalition rally, August 28th in Highland Park.
Okay.
About that next week, ma'am.
Everybody, keep on praying and keep hope alive. God bless you.
Listening to Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. For more information on upcoming shows and guests, please visit our website at www.keephopealiveradio.com.
Everybody, we're still on Facebook Live for about 5 to 10 more minutes. Does anyone else have anything else? Let me see, Jeremy, who I still have here. Jennifer Bishop Jenkins, what would you like to say to all the, I haven't heard, wait a minute, one moment. I haven't heard from Attorney Aaron Connolly for a minute. Attorney Connolly, what do you think about all that you've heard today and coding the ammunition and when you think of this young man leaving his gun behind? Wow. Oof.
Well, I think of the little kids that are coming into the library that I was at yesterday, and they're afraid to go to school because they say the police were at the parade, they couldn't protect us. They're not at my school. What if there's another gunman that comes to school? These are conversations we're having with 6, 7, 8-year-olds. I'm getting kind of sick of justifying the liberty of carrying massive weapons that are created to kill people in war over my child's liberty to go to school safely. I cannot wrap my brain around it anymore. And I thank everybody on this panel who is doing the advocacy work and having these tough conversations about what our values are and what is important. But ultimately, we have to make better choices, and we have to really stand up to these powerful people that have abused our mind in a way that we accept these things as reality. We have different choices. We're electing different kinds of people to Congress. We're electing different types of people in many states that are willing to take on these tough fights. But it's a multifaceted war. And I hope that we as progressives, as Democrats, as folks that are desiring peace in our world instead of war, that we are waking up to realize that the other side is fighting a different kind of battle, and we can't keep going at them with some sort of intellectual argument that they do not care about. We have to fight harder. And I am just embracing my community, and I'm going to go wake up my little guy right now. And I thank all of you for your thoughtful consideration of our Highland Park and Highwood community. We are grieving and hurting, and but I also just want to note that the outpouring of love and generosity and connection that I see can be hopeful, and we have to lean into that.
Well, you know, give John a big hug from his Auntie Santita.
I will. Thank you.
Absolutely.
He loves you so much.
Oh, I love that baby who's going to be taller than me in a couple of years. I won't be able to handle it, but it's coming. I see it every time I see him. But Reverend Jackson, this helps us to think about Matt Harrington, who's still with us, and John Nichols, and Reverend Dr. Yuri, Jennifer Bishop. As awful as this is for us, as traumatizing as Attorney Aaron Connolly has helped us to, to understand how this has impacted the children. Because the 4th of July, when we were children, Daddy, we could not wait for the 4th of July. I don't know what it was. We had the firecrackers and the little snake bombs that we were going to light up in the street, and it was going to be fun, and people were going to be just out having fun, and everybody was going to barbecue, and you were going to hop from one fence to the next, and then all of our parents would end up in somebody's yard. At the end of the night, it was just big fun. That is not a memory that these young people will have. But Reverend, this is also, we have normalized war in the global South. That was one of the things that was so galling about Ukraine, to hear Prince William and so many other people, prominent Europeans, say, this doesn't happen here. I'm like, are you joking? People in Europe, you all have wars every 5 minutes, and then they become world wars because it just gets so messy. What about children who deal with war, Reverend, all over the world? This is something that it's something that happens often, but they're traumatized too, Reverend. Do you think that this is...
children act under trauma in very violent ways, but they surrender. Too many people have surrendered. We didn't that much fight back, because surrender is not a remedy. Fighting back is a remedy. We're talking about having a gigantic rainbow march, maybe in a Highland Park, Skokie, alternate the things for the Washington. 63 centimeters, a massive march, 200,000 people, Black LGBTQ, and others of us. Massive marches were, they set the climate. They represent the people in emotion. This was to take the win this battle.
Well, we'll be hearing more about it, Reverend Dr. Yuri, in March, I guess, in solidarity with all the people of Skokie, and hopefully the people of Gary will be there as well. But Jennifer Bishop, next steps. Can we do anything with this moment?
Yes, we can. There is, I don't want people to ever walk out of this conversation, which is so important to have, by being discouraged by the number and complexity of the problems. There are some very easy, concrete things that we've done in the past and that have worked. We need to ban assault weapons, and we have the votes to do it if they will eliminate the filibuster, or if wouldn't it be nice to just return to actual majority rule in our representative government. We have to address the gerrymandering and the voter suppression issues. The fact that the Republican right wing in this country has been able to manipulate a minority to majority rule by just bending the rules about the representative construction of our country. It's we need to go to nationalized elections and all these other things. But it's going to take some real committed work. But there are easy steps: universal background check and banning assault weapons. These things are on the table. There is a serious lot of support for them, and it would not take much in the way of a huge push by an outpouring nationwide to demand that would happen.
Matt Harrington, what do you want to see happen?
All the above.
Okay.
I want universal background checks. I want assault weapons ban. I want serialization of ammunition, because the real AR that we should be concerned is accountability and responsibility for these mass destruction. Because we don't start there. We are just in the same place, and we're just joking ourselves.
John Nichols, we are in this moment, and it's a political season too. Do you think that the Democrats, I guess I just have a couple of questions for you. Do you think that the Democrats will say this is the moment upon which we will seize, and this is how we can turn things around for the fall? What do you think?
No.
Okay.
I hate to say it.
Okay.
It's painful. Painful.
I wasn't
It's
quite
political.
prepared for that.
Has so much power, so much possibility, is unlikely to do the right thing. But the fact of the matter is, this is what I wrote about in my book, the Democratic Party has become so indebted to campaign donors and so campaign consultants who always give the wrong advice that we can't have confidence that the Democratic Party will do the right thing. What we should have hope for is that the people who make up the base of the Democratic Party will demand action so loudly and so aggressively that the leaders will follow. And that's the best way to understand this. If you are looking for leadership from the Democratic Party at this point, you're going to be disappointed. On the other hand, because the Democratic Party is more reflective of a lot of values that folks on this show are talking about, it is possible to pressure and shame the Democratic Party into doing the right thing, much more possible than the Republicans. And so the best answer to the crisis is for people to do what others on this conversation have suggested, to get actively involved, and to get involved grassroots level and with groups like Operation Push and others that are not the Democratic Party, that are in fact independent, often nonpartisan, but are seeking to raise the issues, raise the consciousness of these to a level that the Democratic Party has to respond. The Republicans are not going to respond. There is a possibility that the Democrats will. And so that's where the energy has to go, and it has to be an urgent energy, because the tragedy of this conversation, everyone on this call knows that by the time we speak again, there will have been another mass shooting.
Oh.
That is the bottom line reality. So if we face that reality, if we know that more violence is coming, more shootings are coming, that more parents will bury children, more children will have to bury parents, that the communities will be torn apart in ways that will take generations to heal. If we know that is our reality, then we have to have a sense of urgency that goes beyond political parties. It raises an issue to the level that political parties must respond. And that makes the grassroots energy an energy driven by, again, groups like Operation Push.
Before we come to Reverend Jackson for closing remarks, Reverend Dr. Hearing, why don't you button all this up for us?
Well, thank you, Santita. I don't know about buttoning it up. There's so much collective genius, and I'm grateful to be a part of this conversation. John just answered very bluntly this question about what the Democratic Party will do, and I would just buttress that a bit by saying it's not for the Democratic Party to decide. It's for the people to decide. And so I think it's time for us, the collective us, with the collective will, to finally make sure that the party understands that it is the will of the people that they represent, not the whims of the party elite. And that makes this election cycle so critically important. 34 states have U.S. Senate elections on the table. They will give you these ranges of color coding, whether they're dark blue or dark red or somewhere in between. But what determines the outcome is not the prediction, but the performance. Who's
going to show up in the window of time, whatever it is, standing in line, bringing your water, doing what you got to do. We know the states have changed the rules and have moved the pieces around to try to confuse the process. But guess what? This ain't the first time they've tried this, y'all. And the people prevailed to be able to move the country forward. And we must and we will prevail again. And so when we sing, we shall overcome, that's not just a single overcoming, that's a continual overcoming. And if we don't keep showing up, then we consent, as Reverend Jackson often tells us when he gives the example about slavery. The only thing worse than slavery is adapting to it. If we don't show up in big numbers in this election, come what may, whatever it takes, rain, sleet, snow, sunshine, heat, whatever it is, if we're not there, we can already see what the radicalization of the last several years, not just the Trump years, but many years going all the way back to Brown v. Board. This is not a new thing. The panic button was pushed when Brown versus Board of Education the first time came down. When the second time it came back, that the court said you must address social inequality with all deliberate speed, that's when the game was on. So let's be real clear. They're trying to divide us because if they frustrate us, they win by simply saying, we knock our pieces over and complete. Now is the time to get your voter registration card, verify your registration, make sure you know your polling place, get the dates down, get your crew together, look at your sample ballot, fill it out, understand everything from at the top of the ballot all the way to the bottom. And let's make sure that we don't leave it up to any party, Democrat, Republican, or otherwise, to determine what the people want and what the people demand.
Indeed. Reverend Jackson, your closing thoughts?
Thank you, Vice President, here for such a profound analysis. I've been locked out of the last two Democrat administrations, 8 years Barack and 2 years now of Biden. We have put more Democrats on the books, more people on the books control Democrats over Republicans. We get more action, more Wall Street action, Silicon Valley action, foreign policy. We're not able to make the input so that Democrats have this right with me, trying to look good, look as they belong to the right way. I think that you can say the best must act and mold opinion, not just follow opinion polls. And that means having the courage to lose in order to win. Because the battles you lose is the right battle. Why did you win the wrong battle? So I think it's battle time to march again. Man, we've made progress the last 6 years. Litigation, registration. When litigated as a principle.
What'd you say, litigation?
Legislation and registration and mass action. We litigate, we win the cases. We legislate, we win those cases. We just do it. Mass action, registration voters across the South, 400,000 blacks on registered in Little Rock, in Arkansas. Is a state where that the governor went to less than 4,000 votes. We were locked out after some of the Ukraine money to the South, $2 or $3 billion unregistered.
Take your time. Take your time. One moment. Wait. Stop. Take your time. Stop. Reparations?
Yes.
No. You know, you say that now. Now that you can say it, say it. Reparations. There you go.
My grandma was not going to vote to take it right.
Reverend, slow down. Slow down.
So we must now use our strength.
There you go.
Massive Southern administration change. South of the Kentucky.
Reverend. Reverend.
Yeah.
That is it. We're gonna go now. Reverend?
I keep the South. Thank you, Santina.
Okay, Reverend.
Friends.
All right, everyone. I want to thank you so much for being with us today. Hope you'll join us tomorrow morning on the Santita Jackson Show. Lots going on. Matt Harrington, wonderful seeing you today. Reverend Dr. Yeary.
Oh, thank you.
Of course, and thank you for joining in. Jennifer Bishop, Attorney Aaron Connolly. Oh, of course, can't wait to have. We have to continue to have this discussion because this was
Sending love to you all.
John Nichols said, by the time we get off this phone, another mass shooting, and that is true. We just don't hear about them all. We hear about them when they say,
yeah, there has to be more than 4 people killed before they even call it that, and
that's happening.
That's common.
And that's happening. It's happening all over the place. It's happening a lot. And my brother Jonathan, who's up for Congress in the fall, said, he said some years ago, as we saw the economy coming apart, and this has been like a generation-long process. He said, as things get worse, as they worsen, you are going to see more craziness, crazy crimes. You're going to have to be careful. So he told me to get out of my heels. Oh, no. And he said, this lovely big jewelry you like to wear. Oh, no, don't wear it. He said, let me tell you something. They are going to start pulling people out of their cars. He said, you're not going to be able to go to the grocery store. My brother said this to me 20 years ago. He said, people will start following you in the grocery store because things are headed in that direction. More than 20 years ago, Reverend Jackson despaired of the collapse. He said the housing bubble is about to burst. The housing market's going to collapse. People are going to be pushed out of their homes. Jennifer Bishop and Attorney Aaron Connolly, Reverend Dr. Yeary, Matt Harrington, Reverend said it. He said this bubble for student loan debt is about to burst. Kids are not going to be able to finish college. They're going to have to move home. They're not going to get married and have children. He said this more than before, Y2K? He saw all of this.
Wow.
And was talking about it and was trying to help campaign to do something about this housing bubble. Don't let it burst. And then as it burst, you saw all of this political tumult. I mean, that's how you got a black president. Not that it wasn't time, but there was so much upset that, we got to try something new. Yes, I will try the black guy. I will do that. Not that he was not qualified. No, there was just so much going on, Reverend Dr. Yeary, Dr. Harrington, and Attorney Connolly and Jennifer Bishop. And now we still have a mess. It's now worse. I mean, January 6th was about all of these other factors, these mitigating factors, as much as it was about the Great Replacement. We've always had the Great Replacement. That's part of what drove the Holocaust, too. I get it. But if we don't recognize these other factors that are driving this, we already have January 6th insurrections happening all around the country. They're happening. And they're not all looking for black people to kill. These folks went up to Washington looking for Nancy Pelosi and Mike Pence. As awful as it was. They weren't looking for me. They were not looking for Maxine Waters, although I don't think they would have been nice if they found her. They were walking the halls saying in this haunting tone, Jennifer and Aaron and Matt and Reverend Dr. Yeary, Nancy. I said, whoa, hold on. What is this? There's something else going on here. These people were toured through the Capitol. They did not let you in the Capitol in 2020. We were in 2021. We were really locked down. Nobody could go out. We need to pay attention to everything that's driving that's driving this insurrection and all of men all around the country.
We have the most diverse leadership we've ever had. Leadership is determined by vision, not by diversity.
That's true.
We have all black and white people think alike. We want to see a way out and act on what we see.
That's right, Reverend, because having a diverse leadership who are all corporatized, that's not helping us. I want some diversity of thought. I want some populists up in there too, who are willing to fight like Bernie Sanders, who came out of the Jackson campaign, who came out of nowhere on us, quite frankly.
I'm trying to work out a chance to go
What you say, Reverend?
I'm trying to go to Russia to talk with Putin himself.
Okay, well, you will do that, but we'll talk about that another time. Let's just leave that right where it is.
Talk about it.
Okay. because we're all trying to free Brittany Griner and we're trying to end the war in Ukraine, as even Henry Kissinger. Woo, Lord, he said stop it, negotiate settlement. Now, if he said that, goodness gracious. Yeah, I said it, everybody, that part. I love you, everybody. See you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show.